Hello, if you're a newcomer, my name is Andach. I speak several languages and I like to learn new ones when I can. Today, let's make the intro in French. Pourquoi pas? Je vais à travailler dans un café. Il fait un peu froid aujourd'hui. Dans mes vidéos précédentes, j'essayais d'expliquer une des méthodes que j'ai utilisées pour apprendre une nouvelle langue. Et dans cette vidéo, j'essayais d'expliquer, à répondre à certaines des questions. Voilà. Et j'ai aussi expliqué comment apprendre une langue nouvelle. Voilà. So, hi everyone. In my previous video, I explained one of the methods that I used to learn a new language, and naturally I got some questions. In this video, I try to respond to at least some of those questions, like briefly, and it also turned out to be a good, quick start guide, kinda, to start to what to take into consideration to learn a new language, like when you are just starting out. So without further ado, let's see you in the video. Let's first start with what not to do at the beginning to avoid some common mistakes. When you are starting a language from zero, like the key element is not necessarily related with studying so many grammar books or having some tedious workload on your shoulders. It's actually quite the opposite. Like, you need to keep it fun and you need to be able to maintain that process of studying regularly, at least until you build the habit. And for that, I do not recommend you to go buy very heavy books and stress yourself unless you have a specific goal, like maybe you're supposed to take an exam, or maybe you will apply for some type of job and proficiency is required, etc. But usually when you are starting out, it's always a good idea to just start with some basics. A lot of people that I've read and watched online are using the term basics as if it is some part of the grammar rules of the language. From my perspective, it actually has a very different meaning. The basics of a language means that which part of the language is actually related with the context that you can use and utilize in your daily life or in a hobby of yours, etc. Like, it is not about, for example, understanding what are the rules of building a sentence with past perfect tense, like in a language. It's just, in fact, you don't even need to know what is past perfect tense, like to be able to speak a language, to be able to communicate using that language. And a lot of the times native speakers actually do not even know those things, like those type of terms. So formulating the language doesn't mean that you are going to become fluent, or you are going to at least feel more comfort using what you know. Ironically, people who study as if they are studying for an exam type of situation often fail at communicating in day-to-day basis. They just become perfectionist about the language, which is kind of like killing the spirit of language. Like, the language is a tool for you to communicate with other people, and it shouldn't become a secondary work for you. It should be something that you can actually find some meaning in it, and that is the key point to achieve. All right, we decided not to burden ourselves with tedious work. So what to do instead? How should we approach our first contact with the language? Read what you can. It can be textbooks if the content of the textbook is not boring for you. It can be some dialogues, it can be some ebooks, it can be even a flyer that you see on the road can sometimes increase your engagement with the language if that, let's say that advertisement is related with something you would like to learn or buy, etc. Like, so long story short, it is usually related with your experience in the language. It's not necessarily related with following a roadmap that some other people have created, etc. Listen to what you can. What are some common mediums that you can go for? One thing is music. Like, it's kind of very obvious. Like, most of us have some kind of music taste, or at least it's not so difficult to build some kind of connection with the music of the target language, because I am sure, like almost in any other language, there will be something that you will like. You just need to go find it. And once you find something that resonates with you, over time, your brain will understand like what kind of sound that language has, and you will possibly start differentiating different sentences and separating them from each other, like different words. And maybe later stages you will start like associating some emotions with certain phrases or certain expressions, because music is a powerful tool that conveys emotions very deeply. And especially if you are into it, like if you are immersed into it, and if you are not just getting lost in your thoughts but also paying attention to the message that is being transferred to you, then you're gonna improve vastly on that. Obviously, there are some other type of audio contents that you can focus on that are usually designed for language learning purposes. Some of them can be podcasts. They will probably go like in gradual steps to introduce some of the content in the language to you step by step, which can be a good approach. Um, Other than that, like you can always listen to dialogues, like you can watch Netflix, you can watch YouTube videos, as long as you are exposed to spoken language, unless you have like a hearing disability or something, and you're gonna improve quickly. And if you have such a disability, probably reading would be a good option for you, etc. I don't know, those are very different and more sensitive topics that maybe we get into later. I need more research on that topic. Anyway, so what else? Textbooks come with some audio content from time to time. Like, if the content is not boring, again, that's a must. You can always find the audio input very useful. Like, you can follow along with the written text, and you can improve your understanding of the dialogue at the very least, or a story perhaps. Well, now that we mentioned what you can read and what you can listen to, let's also mention some of the sources that combine the both approach. For example, some podcasts might have some PDF attachments. You can go for those type of sources. It's a bonus point. The reason is you will not just be exposed to the language itself, but you will also have the opportunity to build your type of knowledge system. Like I did mention some of my note-taking tips and tricks in my previous video. If you haven't seen that one, you can watch it here. When I say building your knowledge system, just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be something complex, and it sounds a little fancy, but it shouldn't overwhelm you at all. Uh, you may simply use a notebook or some papers. In certain occasions, you may even take some useful notes on a piece of napkin. Like, so what matters is you make it your own, and you kind of have some type of written content that you can always come back to and revise what you were exposed to. Because when it comes to language learning, and I think when it comes to learning in general, repetition is kind of your friend. Like, you do want to build habits that helps you repeat the content you were exposed to. That is how you kind of acquire language. We will make a video about this, like learning versus acquiring a language. But the key element is like learning a language doesn't mean that you're not acquiring the language. No, learning might be some deliberate choices you make to learn, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't utilize some of the tricks that your brain is used to and evolved like over a long period of time to acquire information. So basically, what you want is just, if you are not in a naturally spoken environment, particularly, that repetition will be very limited. Like people around you, if they are not always speaking the target language that you are aiming, what is your alternative? Like you need to have something to come back to so that you can revise and you can, check that like repetition thing. So when you check that repetition thing, then you start maybe also measuring your progress as well, but that's another topic. So, and while utilizing your knowledge system, like taking some key points of the content that you were exposed to, uh, it will look appealing to you. Like you may want to, oh, this is that, that is this. Like, let me write this. You may find yourself like, oh, like writing some things down for hours and try to accomplish something with it. But actually, that's not gonna work. Like, if you just take the notebooks that I mentioned and write, let's say, 70, 80 dialogues on it and expect some kind of fluency to come magically, that's not gonna happen over the night. What you need is building your habit, like adapting that habit of coming back to it regularly and put some content in bits and pieces. More frequent it is, I believe, can be more efficient for your brain to pick up things. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Like, do not get overly ambitious about, oh, I'm gonna learn a language like in 24 hours. Yes, you can learn a language in 24 hours, but that doesn't mean that you will be able to speak that language or other than, several sentences in that language. And ironically, if you do that, like you'll most likely forget what you learned in a very short amount of time. So the longer the exposure time is, like the longer the time you remember them. Keep that in mind as well. So let's say that you took some notes or recorded some of the content that you were exposed to in some format. And you also gave your brain enough time to process the information that you were exposed to. What more you can do to enhance your entire learning experience? Well, we do have some modern technologies that can come to aid. Some of them are like text to speech, speech to text. When you are, especially at the beginning, no matter how many words you learn or how many phrases, sentences you learn, you may still fail at the pronunciation, which is an expected outcome. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you need to still be comfortable pronouncing things in a wrong way until you get better at it. But there are some tools that you can utilize to get there faster. And some tools, like text to speech, for example, allows you to put some input. You put just some text in the target language, and it reads it back to you. When you have like audio input, just not just text, you naturally improve your pronunciation as well, even if you do not repeat it. However, there are some techniques that you can use. Like, for example, you can shadow it. Like, when you are hearing it, you can also, like, after a few seconds, you can repeat it, etc. What about speech to text? Speech to text is the opposite of it, like, but it's almost as useful as text to speech. It allows you to just dictate the language, like you speak, and it just writes it in the target language. So there are many tools that you can utilize for those type of technologies. At the very basic, you have like access to Google Translate. If you are using an Apple device, like the translation tool they have also has it. Some of your browsers in the in your laptop can help you with that. My own app Langlogy has that, like both text to speech and speech to text, and both of are, by the way, free features. You can just use it for free, that part. Some of the apps also allow you to record your voice and store it as an audio file. Those apps are usually flashcard based apps. Uh, One of the most well known and utilized one is called Enki. You probably heard of it. For me, they do not actually work very well for the most part. I tried to utilize them many times in the past, and this is the problem, like the initial configuration time that I need to make, and then not being able to find what I'm looking for in that entire chunk. Uh, it's just the process is so cumbersome, and I end up not coming back to it and starting regularly. If you cannot build your habit around something that you can come back to with little bit of pleasure element, then you end up not doing it. And if it is not repetitive enough, you're not going to get very far. You're just going to learn uh, some basic stuff at the beginning. So, which is why I find Duolingo is kind of a good app from that perspective. Like it's kind of easy to start, easy to continue, is engaging, etc. Uh, do I recommend their methodology? Not at all, because if you ask my opinion, they break the language down to two little chunks, and when you break it down to like syllables, small words, etc., you're actually limiting your natural exposure to the natural spoken language or the context. And when you take little pieces out of context, uh, you are just actually creating another task for you to accomplish. And yeah, there are some nice animations and whatnot that gives you, sensation of reward mechanism, which is why it's engaging. From that perspective, it is a successful app. But can you become fluent just by relying on an app like Duolingo? It's very unlikely and almost impossible, if you ask my opinion. Now that we talked about the input part, let's also mention the output part a little. Like the input part was mostly related with being exposed to the language. So you acquire the language and maybe deliberately learn some of it. That actually is the crucial part before the output phase. But when you come to the output phase, there are also some things to keep in mind. One of them is, like, in my experience, when you interact with native speakers, especially if you are in their environment, they are usually very encouraging. They often say nice things about you speaking their language. Probably they feel honored, and they compliment you, etc., which can then fuel you to come back to your studies or your practice, and then you will continue your journey with motivation. Uh, Unless the topic that you are trying to talk about is very complex, like you might then feel discouraged if you do not understand a very high percentage of the spoken language. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to output, when you are practicing with non-native speakers particularly, some of them might actually try to discourage you about your language level, etc. And the reason behind it is, like, they have also put some work into learning that language, probably was different from your methods, and they've went to maybe different courses or they studied differently, etc. So psychologically, they might kind of want to compare themselves with you, or they might want to uh, justify their whatever method they adapted. That's like a very common behavior, very common human behavior, if you ask me. And that's not just about languages, it's pretty much about anything. But that's, of course, a trait. Like, it doesn't apply to everyone. It's just one dangerous point that you need to keep in mind. Like, you should not allow anyone to discourage you from uh, engaging with your language. Like, as you may butcher it, you have the right to butcher it. Because guess what? like a native person's child is butchering the language when learning. That's just the natural process of learning. You cannot learn to walk before, I don't know, falling at all. Like, you just need to embrace that, and you need to get out of your comfort zone when you are practicing it. If you just aim for perfectionism, and then you will most likely going to detach at some point, because that will be a very unattainable goal for you. So keep that in mind, and do not let anyone, native or non-native, to discourage you about your language level or about how you learn it. Okay, it's your own journey, and you are entitled to have it your way, no matter what. See you in the next video.